Hey guys, Matt Halpern here. This is the first satellite episode of Chocolate Croissants, where sadly I don't have my two partners, Jordan and Justin, with me because I am in Toronto, Ontario, in Canada, and those two guys are back home in Baltimore. The reason I am in Canada is because I am on tour currently with my band Periphery, and today is a day off. I'm in a hotel room. I believe we're in a Holiday Inn near a mall, and that's pretty much what we do on days off. We walk around a mall, we eat food. Something really cool that I did today is, for a first time, is did hot yoga, and we'll talk about that as I dig into this with our guest. And that's really the cool part about this satellite podcast, is that we actually have a guest that I'm going to interview. The person I'm going to interview is my very good friend, my touring brother, and Periphery's lighting director, Jeff Holcomb. And Mark Holcomb is Jeff's brother. For those of you who know Periphery, Mark is the guitar player in the band. Jeff has played shows with us on bass. Jeff has sold merch for us on tour. He's done lights for us, and we actually a lot of times kind of just like having him around because his energy and his personality is just so chill and very, very infectious and easy to be around. And I kind of, when I thought about bringing on a guest, he was the first one that I wanted to bring on because his story is pretty incredible, and I don't know if he's ever told it to anybody, so that's what we're going to do today. So, hi, Jeff.
Hey guys.
What's up?
Hi, Matt. How you doing?
We've done a bunch of stuff together. I mean, we've toured for years now. You even came out on the first Common Thread Clinic tour with me and Mike Johnson and JP Beauvais, and you filmed. Mm-hmm. We've been all over the world together.
Yeah.
But prior to that, I mean, if we go all the way back, you've lived tons of places, to my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where have you lived? Like, just that alone is interesting to me.
So to kind of put my life in a nutshell, I was actually born in Ohio. I spent maybe about 6 to 8 months there, and then moved to the Philippines because my dad was in the Air Force. So Mark and I grew up in the Philippines for maybe 7 years, and volcano exploded there. It was a crazy story. Mount Pinatubo is the name of the volcano, but basically forced us to leave, and that was pretty much the last stable place I ever lived, was the Philippines.
So hold on. Here's the question. Mm-hmm. I don't know anybody else who's ever been in a volcano. What is that like?
I mean, it's kind of hard to explain. Like, we knew it was going to explode, so we kind of knew that something crazy was going to happen, you know? Like, we had heard that the volcano might explode any day, any week, any month, you know?
How old were you?
I was 7.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, I'm at school, and some kind of alarm goes off, and we all go outside and see a big plume of smoke, like a huge plume of smoke, like on the horizon, you know? But it takes up a huge amount of the sky, even though it's like pretty far away, maybe like 40 or 50 miles or something. And I think it took another day or two for it to actually hit where we are, you know, all that ash to come down where we are. And there's just a lot of earthquakes. I remember we had to sleep under our kitchen table for 2 nights because of the earthquakes. The power was out, so everyone was in the dark. We didn't have a radio or a TV.
Was there ash
everywhere? Yeah. We woke up the next morning and the whole town was covered in white. It looked like it had snowed all night.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So was it, I mean, did a lot of families, did anyone get hurt? I know your family was okay, but did people actually get hurt from that?
Actually, I don't know about that. 'Cause I was lucky enough to where I lived on a military base, you know, but all around the military base is, you know, I guess you could consider it pretty third world, you know, in that part of the Philippines, at that part of at that particular part of time, you know? So I really don't know, but it did cause a lot of destruction. And I do know it was something like one of the top 10 biggest eruptions in modern history or something like that.
Wow. I can't imagine that, especially at that age. Mm-hmm. So did you have to relocate at that point?
Yeah. So we had to get on a boat. That's kind of when my family split up. It was me, Mark, and my mom, and my dad had to stay behind. And we got on a boat. They took us to an island, still somewhere in the Philippines. We spent like 2 days there. And then we took a helicopter out of there. And then eventually ended up in California. And then that's when I started living in the States and got Americanized.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really intense to go through at such a young age, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Although it didn't really feel intense, you know, it was just kind of like, this is happening, you know. I guess at that young of an age, you know, you don't really think like this is like some big rare event, you know what I mean? Like, I was just letting my parents carry me through it, you know. I remember actually like during it, it's not like it was like everyone was freaking out. I remember like I would make friends at the little campground they put us in, you know, and we'd all be playing with swords and stuff, you know. So we were like, it was like a really fun time, like amidst all the chaos that was actually happening, you know.
Do you think your parents were more stressed than you were?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, there was just so much to figure out. Mm-hmm. So with you guys having to relocate, was that something that the military helped with? Like, did they help your family get settled in California?
I'm pretty sure they did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's really good. Mm-hmm. That's really good. So what was California like, and how long were you there?
It's kind of a blur, but I remember getting to California, and my mom kind of like, you know, we didn't have a place to live, so we would jump all around. You know, she'd take Mark and I to these different schools, trying to find a new place to live. I remember one time Mark and I were at a school for one day. You know, we were like the new kids in class. And then the next day we left, you know, we like played Heads Up, 7-Up and everything. So I could like meet all the new kids. But yeah, then we just left the next day and never saw them again. So the next couple of years were like that a lot, just picking up and moving, you know. I think my mom at the time was just trying to find some stability and didn't know the best way or the best place to get that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you did find the stability, did you stick in one school for a while? Like, when did you go to high school, I guess, and graduate like a normal kid in some way?
Yeah.
Where was that?
Eventually my mom remarried, and so we kind of like had a family kind of home again, you know, and that was in Southern California, in a town called Menifee. And yeah, I went to middle school there. I went to elementary school there, then middle school, and then high school. But then in my first year of high school, my stepdad, the new father figure in the picture, he got stationed to Spain. So we moved to Spain in my first year of high school.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Did you speak Spanish at all at that point?
No. And I definitely did not want to go, you know? Like, it was like the worst possible thing that was happening in my life, that I was leaving all my friends behind, you know?
That's interesting. And I'm sure that's really hard, but... And I mean, we can talk about this, or we can't. We don't have to talk about this, but the other night, you know, we were sort of having a heart-to-heart about just different stressors in our lives and things like that. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me like if I were you and I thought back to that experience, like, and ask myself those same questions, like what's the worst case scenario? How is this going to play out? Like that seems pretty heavy to deal with as a ninth grader, you know, or a 10th grader. Like, how did you deal with that? Like, how did you, because you had no choice. So how did you deal with it? Was that it? It's just, I had no choice. I got to roll with it. Or did you act out against it? Or did you just kind of make the best of it with the situation?
Probably a mixture of both, you know, like I definitely tried to fight it, you know, and like Mark and I both didn't want to go because we actually formed our first band there in California, and we were still in. I remember that was the reason I wanted to stay in California the most, because we had a band. It was like my first ever band, you know, and moving to Spain was basically like throwing that all away, you know, like all the work we had put into it. I mean, we were only like, you know, I was 14 and Mark was 16 or something like that, you know, but it was like, we were both very passionate about it, and, you know, it just kind of seemed really unfair that now we had to move and leave that, and it was something that was out of our control, you know? So I think there was a lot of resentment. I remember, like, the first whole year I was in Spain, I was just, like, purposely, you know, in a childish way, like, you know, letting my parents know that I definitely was not happy, you know? Like, I refused to make friends. I refused to, like, go out and, like, you know, socialize. And, you know, so I just kind of sit at home all day so they could see how upset I was, you know?
Do you think that was, like, kind of like a grieving process in a way?
I think so.
You know?
Yeah.
Like leaving home behind?
Yeah. It wasn't all just, like, showing them I'm mad. It was like, yeah, definitely like actually being sad and feeling like I didn't fit in Spain, you know, like, but I mean, then Spain actually ended up turning into like the golden years of my life, you know, like I'm so glad I moved there, and I made friends that are gonna last a lifetime. And you know, I had all my coming of age stories there in Spain, you know.
That's awesome. The people that you met there that are friends for life now, were they other transplants to the military base, or were they actual people that were from the area?
Yeah, pretty much most of them were transplants as well, military brats from all over the world that have kind of all been just brought there in, you know, a lot of them against their will, or, you know, just whatever. So we were all in the same boat, you know, and I think that's what made it, like, that's where the bond formed, you know, like one of my friends was like born and raised in Virginia, and now he's like all of a sudden taken away and placed in Spain, you know, and this guy is from, you know, Italy, you know, from a military base there. And like, you know, so we're all like coming and going from these like these special places that we grew up in and being placed there. And, you know, and that actually ended up being what made it so awesome, you know, that we are all going through the same thing.
And to me, it seems like those experiences were the foundation for even the rest of your story and what you do now. It seems to me, based on what I know about you, that you don't have a problem being anywhere in particular, finding a place to sleep, traveling on a whim, going to a new place and not being intimidated by it. Seems like something that you very much have under control. You know, and
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you can talk about that kind of stuff, but I mean, it seems like there was a pretty fundamental period in that regard.
I think definitely like that, you know, because I'm kind of as you were saying, I'm kind of like maybe I would say I'm kind of a chameleon. No matter where I'm at in the world, I feel comfortable, you know, and I think a lot of that has to do with my childhood, you know, like I never had, you know, long-term stability. It was always change. So change just kind of feels like it needs to happen, you know?
Did you ever feel like you wanted that stability in your life, though? I mean, how did you go about finding that? Or how are you trying to discover that sort of stability?
I feel like now at this point in my life, like I don't think I've ever really found true, like when I think of stability, I think of like, you know, having lived in a place for like 10 years or something, you know, where you know everyone in town, or, you know, you have this support system, or, you know what I mean? Like, long-term friends that you've seen every day and you grow up with and you go through these big experiences with, you know? I mean, I have friends that I've known for a long time, like all you guys, but, you know, we go on tour and we don't see each other for 4 or 5 months, you know? And then, like, and that's kind of how it is with all my friends, really. Like, I can't think of one friend other than my wife, Louise, who has been just a consistent part of my everyday life for years, you know?
Yeah. But I guess that's another form of stability too, is, you know, having strong bonds that don't require you to be in the same room all the time. That's a pretty awesome thing to have. And I see it all the time. Whenever we are on tour, we'll be in like the most obscure place ever, and you're like, oh, me and Mark are going to hang out with like a friend from high school, and it's in this random part of the world that you would never expect to know anybody. But that's kind of cool to me. You know, it definitely, it makes sense as far as what I know about you and your story. So after high school and those quote unquote golden years, what was next? Did you go to college? Did you go to university?
Well, I remember right after graduating high school in Spain, we moved back to California, like pretty much like a week later. And at first I was stoked, you know, like, cause like in Spain, you know, you miss things like Taco Bell and like, you know, cause the only really like, you know, Spanish food is kind of like pretty much like seafood, which is great. You know, but after going through 4 years of it, you're like, I just want some Taco Bell or something.
Yeah,
you know?
You want like a big plate of American burger.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like stoked. I was like, yeah, I'm going back to California. I'm going back to what I was like missing really bad that first year I was in Spain. You know, I was going back to see all my old friends again. You know, and it actually turned out like it was just, you know, not what I was expecting at all. Like all my friends who I had before, they'd all grown up, been through high school together, had their own social connections and friendships, and I was kind of like excluded from all that. And yeah, moving back to California was like not good at all. I went in another funk, you know. And I did go back to community college, or I did go to community college. But that kind of just turned into, you know, I wasn't motivated, you know, I didn't like want to learn. So I ended up dropping out after like 2 years, and, I got a job at a home loans company called Countrywide, and worked there about 2 years, not really enjoying it, but I was making money. I wasn't able to save money. So I was just kind of like just coasting through life and just meandering and not really having a direction and
kind of just existing. Did you have a creative outlet at that point? I mean, were you still playing music with Mark at that time, or was it pretty much just like wake up, go to work, go to sleep, repeat?
Yeah. It was like definitely no creative outlet. I wasn't working on anything, wasn't working on hobbies, you know. It was just like wake up, go to work, come back, and like grab a 40 and drink it, watch TV, and go to bed and do it all over again.
Were you like a weekend warrior? Like you lived for the weekend at that point, or was that even kind of just like?
Yeah, the weekend was just it was just like, it's not like I would go out and do stuff, you know. It was actually like a pretty dark time, I remember, you know.
Were you living out in California by yourself at that point, or was Mark and friends with you, as well?
Mark was living in Madrid in Spain, going to college, and then he eventually moved to Washington, D.C. So he probably was in D.C. at the time, and I was living with my mom and my little brother Nathan.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha. So then you made the move to D.C. at some point too. Was that pretty much right after the Countrywide experience?
Yeah, so I worked at Countrywide about 2 years, and then it felt like my only way out. Like I remember being pretty miserable at this point in my life, and I was like, the only way out is joining the military. So I signed up for the Air Force. I went to, I got drug tested, took the ASVAB, they placed me in a really good position. I was going to be a linguist, where they'd give me something like a $10,000 signing bonus. And I was like, this is it. This is my ticket, and I was stoked about it. And then literally 3 days before I was, I guess, I don't know the official word for it, but I guess getting sworn in, Mark called me from DC and asked me if I wanted to move out there and join his band, Haunted Shores,
Wow.
So all of a sudden now I was placed with these two options, the military or Haunted Shores, which, by the way, didn't mean I was going to go over there and make a bunch of money making music, No, but
it's a huge change.
Yeah, very different, you know. So, yeah, eventually I decided to move to DC,
So was it easy to actually get out of going forward with the Air Force?
Yeah, it was physically it was easy. I just pretty much called him and said, I'm not going to do it. But mentally it was hard, mentally it was hard because, I'd already convinced myself and I was already stoked about it that I wanted to do it,
How did you make that decision? What was, because I bet you there's a lot of people that have those kinds of decisions in their lives where it's do you do this thing that could give you a potential stable career going forward? Mm-hmm. Or do you do this thing that is completely uncertain but feels right?
But feels right.
You know what I mean? What? And obviously you chose what feels right to you.
Yeah.
Was it a pretty easy decision? I understand that the process and sort of the debriefing of it took some time to deal with, but was it an easy decision to make?
I don't think it was easy, but yeah, I think that's the big dilemma that a lot of people are having, right? Do I do what I want to do, or do I do what will bring me stability, or get me on my feet financially or whatever, And I guess my personality is more someone that will do whatever brings me the most experience, Mm-hmm. And I think at the time it felt like moving to DC and joining a band was going to be the kind of experience I was looking for, much more than the military, because, the thing about the military is, yeah, you get to travel the world and all that, but you're in a chain of command, you have a superior who has a superior, and you're doing whatever they tell you to do, whereas joining a band, you become your own boss. I think that was the main appeal for it with me,
You wanted to have the control over your life at any given point.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So you moved to DC. Mm-hmm. You start playing in Haunted Shores with Mark.
Mm-hmm. Then I met you guys.
Right.
Yeah.
But see, I don't know if I met you around that time. But way before that, I think from my understanding of the story, you were in DC, you were playing in Haunted Shores, you're recording stuff, you're playing some shows.
Yeah, we played a couple little shows.
Okay. At what point then, though, did you decide I'm going to peace out of DC? Because didn't you leave again?
Yeah.
So what was that about?
So that was like, I started working at a law firm as like, I guess, a paralegal, even though I wasn't trained as a paralegal at all.
And that was in DC?
Yeah.
How'd you get that job?
From my buddy Nick Dodd.
Okay.
Yeah. His mom hooked me up with it. I actually, when I first got to DC, when I drove across the country, my first night there was at Mark had, so to give you backstory, Nick he was a singer in Haunted Shores. So he was my soon-to-be bandmate, you know. And so he and Mark threw like a little welcoming party for me at their house, at Nick's house in Virginia, you know. And so I got there, became really good friends with Nick and, you know, all of his friends. And I met his mom, who was super nice, and she just wanted to give me work because when I got there, I only had about $200, and so she was like really nice, and she was just like, you know, you can work on my garden, you know, I'll pay you to work on my garden. So I worked there at her garden for like a month, and then after that was all done, she was like, well, I guess you can work at my law firm, you know.
So you had a chance to learn about gardening. Had you ever done that before?
No.
Was there someone above you there that showed you how to do it?
No.
How'd you figure that out?
It was like day by day, you know. She'd be like, hey, can you mulch the garden? And I'd have to like look up what mulching is, you know.
Was there even like YouTube or Google at this point?
I would like Google it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was Google back then. This was like 2005 or something, you know.
Okay.
YouTube wasn't as big yet, but yeah, there was resources. So I'd like, you know, mulch this, and then like I'd find out that I didn't mulch enough, you know, or whatever. Like I'd do a bad job, then I'd have to do, you know. So I was like, I'd have to get better at it each day, you know. And also there was this electrician named Gary who would come around, and I'd help him wire stuff in the house and stuff too.
Wow. So you're learning lots of stuff while playing in a band and just kind of figuring it out.
Yeah.
Figuring out what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did that, then you started working as a paralegal.
Uh-huh.
And then what's next after that?
And then, I guess, you know, I'd lived, at this point, you know, I was living in DC, you know, playing with the band, maybe for about 4-5 years. I think it was in 2009 when I actually left. But it was, you know, kind of the same thing that I went through in California with the home loans company, you know, like, I think it was like being stuck inside all day, not doing what like I truly wanted to do, which at that point I wasn't sure about what I wanted to do, you know, but I just knew this wasn't it, you know. And I remember like looking outside the window in the office and like seeing all these people like just being all happy, riding bikes or like whatever. And like here I am, you know, I'd be stuck inside all day, and I get off work and then I'm too tired to do the things that I actually want to do. So I go home and make a dinner and then go to bed and do it all over again, you know?
So the societal norm is not really for you, is what you kind of learned, I think, over those bunch of years.
Yeah.
For a lot of years.
Yeah. And I'd try to fight it too. Like I'd try to like force my mind to adapt to fitting in, you know? Like, because, you know, in my head, my logic was obviously everyone else here is doing it and they're content with this lifestyle. So there must be something wrong with me, you know? And so it was like a problem that needed to be fixed, you know?
I get it. It's really cool though, because now I would imagine you can look back or at least from the outside perspective, from my perspective, I look at this and I say, well, it kind of makes sense because you didn't really have a normal childhood with stability. You didn't grow up in one house, in one place, and go to one school with the same friends and then get a job in your hometown. You've been already up until this point of your life, you've been all over the place. You started your life with adventure. Mm-hmm. And that pretty much continued even up until this point. So it makes sense to me that the stagnant aspect of working in an office is not for you. That totally makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So you got fed up.
I got fed up. And eventually, I remember actually what changed everything was like bicycles, you know? Like my buddy let me ride his bicycle to the grocery store because like I didn't want to drive my car or something, you know, and it was like an old road bike and it wasn't in good shape. But, you know, at this point I hadn't ridden a bike since I was like maybe 8 years old. So I like got on it and remembered how awesome it was. I was like going up and down curbs and like, you know, it was just like a really liberating feeling, you know, like going like just as fast as city traffic, you know, but like not being stuck in traffic, you know, just like weaving through, like it was just an awesome feeling, you know? And so I got really into biking like during the last year of my life in DC. And like, it kind of like, and then I discovered like bike touring. I was like watching videos online of like people who do bike tours, you know? And in my head, I was thinking like, that's what I want to do. Like whatever that guy is going through, I want to like put myself in that situation, you know? I don't know if I'm going to like it or hate it, but I was like, this is just something that needs to happen or else I'm going to be wondering about it the rest of my life, you know?
Yeah.
So I had to figure out a way to transition from, you know, my life in DC where I have, you know, I had like my own stuff, like furniture and like a nice computer and my own bed and a car and, you know, and like not to mention all my friends and all that. Like, so I had to transition from this with my job and everything to, I guess I had an idea of me being like this, you know, lone traveler. Nomad, yeah. Who only owns the things that fit on his bicycle. You know what I mean? Like that's all I own. Like I wanted to get rid of everything and not only just have everything in there, but be okay mentally with having everything. You know what I mean? Like cutting all those things down to being that person. And that was like a year-long or maybe even 2-year-long transition. Finally getting into that nomadic lifestyle.
So what was the first step to doing that after DC? Was that the fish farm story?
Yeah. So it wasn't, I mean, realistically, I knew I can't just, maybe some people could just like give away everything and then just go buy a bike and just go, you know? But
not everybody is Forrest Gump.
Yeah. Most people aren't, you know? And like, you know, it's because I think that's what stops people the most is giving up these things that we become attached to, you know? And I was attached to a lot of these things. So I knew I had to systematically get rid of them. And I met my buddy Dylan, who I actually met in Spain. He's one of my high school friends that's going to be my friend forever. He's one of my best friends, but he came to visit DC, and I always remembered him as this like pale, skinny, white, short kid, you know. But then he came to visit, and he was like, he just looked like he had been through a lot of shit in the past year or so, you know. Mm-hmm. Like he had like long hair. He was like golden bronze in December, you know, like. And he told me he had just gotten back from living in Honduras for a year, scuba diving, you know, for like a year in some tin shack that he was spending like $20 a month for. And I just thought that was so cool. And I was like, how do I, get to that point? And he's just like, I don't know, man. You just got to do it, And like, and then he was, so I was like, so what did you do? What kind of started this for you? And he had told me about this job in Alaska, the salmon hatchery. Basically, he worked there for a summer. So it's like this, you're at a salmon hatchery, you are working with fish, you're spawning eggs, and you're
real quick, not to interrupt you, but so what is a salmon hatchery? What's the purpose of it?
Okay, so a salmon hatchery is, so without salmon hatcheries, we're eating too much fish as a human species, so we need to make more, so we can eat more. So basically it's this facility where they'll grow some fish, like a bunch of fish, million of salmon, raise them till they get to a certain age, and then set them free into the wild. And then these salmon will swim around the Pacific Ocean for 3-4 years. And salmon have this like sense where they go back to where they were born eventually to die, or spawn and then die. And so they would always swim back to the hatchery every summer without fail, and whatever batch of salmon came in, that was the ones that the hatchery had grown 3 or 4 years prior,
Yeah.
So it was like pretty cool. And so as the fish are swimming back in, there's fishermen like at the lip of the bay, just like with big nets, like waiting for them to catch them. But, the salmon hatcheries kind of tell them like, okay, you guys can only catch so much. You got to let this many through, So the hatcheries regulate that. They let this much fish through. The fish swim into the hatchery up a fake river, because when salmon like are ready to spawn, they look for the fresh water that's dumping into the ocean,
right.
So the hatchery had to build like this fake freshwater river. So all these fish are like swimming up this river, which is actually going into the hatchery, where they're about to get like electrocuted and shocked and then cut open by people like me and have their eggs pulled out of them, and have some other guy squirting fish jizz onto those eggs, and then
it starts the process over.
Yeah.
They spawn more eggs.
Yeah.
Or more salmon, and then they set them free and come back eventually.
Yeah. And I remember something like, it's called the fecundity rate. Basically, like if we didn't, intervene with nature, if we were just let them spawn in the wild, it's something like a 10 to 15% fecundity rate, like these eggs actually becoming adults. But in the hatchery, it was something like a 99.6% fecundity rate.
So although you're sort of ending the lives of the fish after they've had a nice full run, so to speak,
yeah,
it's positive in that you're helping more fish to be born,
yeah,
and have lives essentially,
yeah,
and then feed people like us,
yeah,
right.
Mm-hmm.
So you ended up going there and working there.
Mm-hmm.
Is the long story short?
Yeah, that was like my first, I guess, journey outside of DC. I quit my job, and a week later I flew to Alaska, which whoever's listening, I would highly suggest, if you're ever stuck in a position where you just want to get out of, but you don't know where or what to do because you're worried about money or whatever. Like this, the reason this job was so good was because, first of all, they take pretty much anyone who's able-bodied and willing to work, and you just had to pass a drug test, but that's easy, and then they pay for your food and housing for however long you live there. You just have to pay for your flight there, pay for some rain gear, which costs about $100 for the good stuff, and maybe another $90 for some rain boots, or for some like these hardcore fisherman boots. But so you make that investment, and then you can, you don't have to worry about anything while you're there. You don't have to worry about rent, bills. It's just a great way to transition out of, this stressful life that I had in DC into, the next step.
Yeah, without having to worry about the bills, you can kind of take the parts of your mind that are occupied there and free them up into the next step, maybe, or whatever it is that you're doing in the moment.
Yeah.
So how long were you there for?
I was there about 3 months.
Okay.
3 months. It was, it was great. Like, it was really hard work, but it's like work that I felt like I needed to do, I had never like really touched a fish ever, in my life before that. And, now, and by the end of it, I was like this grizzled, like, fish killing machine, that Alaskan, I was like going on hikes. I'd see bears every single day. Like, they're just there walking around the hatchery,
Was nature a big part of that for you? Like a big part of you being able to let go of the normalcy of city life, so to speak, was the natural aspect of that something that really, affected you?
Yeah. And I guess like, I'm naturally drawn to nature, I have a belief that everyone really truly is deep down, even if we don't know it yet. A lot of people will say, oh no, I hate nature. Like, why would you want to go out there? There's nothing to do out there, but yeah. That's
like the most calm place for me ever, is just being in nature. That's why I think I love having my dog so much. It's because it gives me a reason every day to go outside.
Yeah.
Go to the woods, go for a walk.
Yeah.
And just be around the life that's there.
I mean, to me, it's like, it is real life, like it is real life. Like, it's what's actually happening, like, I mean, yeah, things are actually happening, in our cities and things like that. But, there's something happening underlying all of that, because cities are part of nature too,
Yeah.
Like, everything is natural, But if we want to look at nature in its rawest form, untouched by humans, like, I don't know, that to me is just like real life. And it's been just really important to me to not forget that and stay in touch with it, So yeah.
So what was the next step after the 3 months there?
So I had planned on, once I'm done with that trip, once I'm done with Alaska, I would fly to Seattle and bike down the Pacific coast, basically down to San Diego. Like, and I guess that obviously starts from the whole bike touring thing, like my desire to be on a bike traveling like that. Yeah, it was just like, I don't know, like, it was really scary. Well, first of all, I remember when I was riding my bike around DC, I hurt my knee, and when you get injured, you automatically think the worst, like, this is going to last forever, or this is something. So when I hurt my knee, I was so bummed. I thought, my knee is going to be hurt forever and I'm never going to ride a bike again. So I told myself, and my knee was hurt for like weeks or maybe even like 2 or 3 months or something, and I told myself, like, if I ever get better again, then I'm going to ride my bike across the country, like, that's how much, I don't know, like, being injured kind of changed me in that way, in a good way.
It gave you the determination to sort of fight against the ailment
Yeah.
and prove that you could do something, not just like, riding down the street from work to your house, but something pretty extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. And it made me realize how I had taken my health for granted, like, which is, something I still do all the time. And I think a lot of people still do, is we take what we already have for granted. You know what I mean? It's not until we lose something that we realize, it's like how when you feel sick, when you get sick, like how amazing being healthy again feels, or how it must feel. But then once you get well again, a couple days later, you're just like, whatever,
Yeah.
It's like back to normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's those constant reminders that we all need, but hopefully they don't show up in the form of a busted knee or a sickness.
Yeah.
I mean, we can make the choice to think about those things every day.
I mean, ideally, that's, that would be great if I could, we could remember to stay aware of that, all the time, whether we're sick or healthy. Be grateful for what we do have, So, but yeah, anyways, so yeah, that's kind of like the main motivation for that bike tour. So I flew to Seattle. My buddy had sent my bike there, so I had picked it up. Actually, my friend picked me up from the airport in Seattle. I spent about 4 or 5 days with him in Whidbey Island, maybe like an hour north of Seattle or something like that. And bought a tent, got some camping gear, but my bike wasn't arriving in the mail until like a certain day, so I couldn't just leave yet. So yeah, I spent that couple of days just kind of decompressing from Alaska, getting, reacquainted with society again. Because in Alaska, I'd only lived with like 6 or 7 people, and there was no internet, no TV, no phones, So it was a really,
Big transition.
Big transition, yeah. And yeah, so, and then the bike came in the mail, and I just started biking, and it was like I definitely had brought way too much stuff with me, like once I thought, okay, I'm easily going to be able to fit all this stuff on my bike, like seeing it all laid out in front of me. I had like a tent, sleeping bag. I had like 2 weeks worth of clothes. I had, 2 pairs of shoes, like one like for hiking and one for just everyday activities, I think I even had like a little laptop, and I tried to like fit all that on my bike. So in the end, I had 2 big saddlebags. I had a big bag sitting on the top of my rear rack on my bike. Then I had a giant backpack, like a hiking backpack, on my back, and I had a little backpack on top of that.
Sounds like it would take a long time to go from Seattle to San Diego.
Yeah.
With all that stuff. So, I mean, did you ditch?
Yeah. I mean, like quickly, like 2 miles down the road, I realized that this is not, this is not going to cut it. Like, I was hurting really bad, like, my back really hurt, and like the bike was heavy and cumbersome, and I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. So I went to a post office, mailed like 60-70% of it all back, and kept just the necessities: tent, sleeping bag, like 2 days worth of clothes, and like a little stove, and like random like tools, like bike parts and things like that, and narrowed it down to like just those 2 saddlebags and a little bag on top, so nothing on my back, which was actually the key.
Wow.
If you're doing a bike tour, don't ever put anything on your back. Make sure everything is fitting on the bike. And yeah, but I mean, so that first day I biked about 20 miles, And I was like destroyed, at the end of that day. And I remember getting, I was just like, I'm just going to bike until I get tired or the sun goes down or whatever, I was still kind of in the mode. This is my first day of being like a real nomad, so I was like stoked and scared, it was like really scary. And I wanted to do it in this way where like, I'm just not going to plan it at all. I'm just going to do it and let whatever happens just happen, So I biked until it got dark, and I remember just like pulling off the side of this road I was on and walking into the woods about 10, 20 feet and just setting up my tent there and sleeping, And that was like an interesting night because I really, really wanted to give up right there.
Mm-hmm.
Like because I'd only biked 20 miles, but I was destroyed and I had about 1,800 more to go, and like it was just so daunting to me, like getting down to San Diego. I was like, what am I doing, like, and my mom had like told me earlier that day, she's like, just so you know, if you ever want to give up, or if you ever, if you want me to, I'll come and pick you up, so like, I was like, I could end this at any time and just have my mom come pick me up, and I could be like laying on her couch watching a movie with some hot chocolate or something, and I like was about to do that. Like I was about to just call her and be like, can you come pick me up? But I was just like, all right, I'm just going to wait till tomorrow and see how I feel, And so, yeah, I woke up and packed up my stuff, still in my head, not sure what to do. Am I going to bike today or am I going to call my mom? And I just like packed my stuff up and got on the bike and started riding, and it felt a little better than yesterday. I was a little bit stronger, and I think I biked 30 miles that day. And then, I was like, this is fine. I'm doing it, went to bed, woke up, did I think 40 miles. And then by then, like, it just felt really nice. And I was like strong by the fourth or fifth day. I was like doing like 50 or 60 miles. And, before I knew it, I was in Oregon. And then, yeah, consecutive days later, I ended up in San Diego. And it was, that whole stretch of time is like a big adventure in itself. It'd take a long time to talk about everything that happened then.
So funny enough, I was actually thinking about that because I feel like there's certain things that I know of from that story that I would love to dig into. Mm-hmm. And that story in and of itself, as you said, is pretty amazing. I mean, I think you really discovered a lot about who you are, obviously, mm-hmm. from going from wanting to quit to pushing through day by day, minute by minute. Mm-hmm. I think you learn a lot about yourself. Yeah. But I think we should do like a part 2 where we actually dig in really to like that first night. Because I remember you telling me that was one of like the most terrifying nights of your life. Mm-hmm. I think there's some other really cool experiences along that trip that you've told me about that I think would be cool for people to hear about. So we should really do a part 2, mm-hmm. I think.
Yeah. No, yeah, I'm down. And like, yeah, it's like, I'm like mentally, I'm trying to figure out what should I talk about and what should I leave out, because there's so much within these stories that's happening that is like really important in my opinion, but I don't want to like bore everyone with like the little details, you know what I mean?
I don't think I'm sitting here like on the edge of my seat this whole time enjoying your story. And I feel really good about hearing this from you because of the conversation that we had the other day. Because, it's amazing to me that someone who has done as much as you've done, who's overcome as much as you've overcome, mm-hmm. can have moments of weakness and self-doubt, mm-hmm. which it's just a good reminder that no matter how strong of a person you are, what you've been through, everybody goes through that. Mm-hmm. And when I hear your story, it's like, well, I've lived a sheltered life pretty much, and I feel like a little baby in a lot of ways. So, I mean, I respect so much about your story thus far, and I respect so much about the things that you've pushed yourself through, to where it almost blows my mind that any one of us in the band could ever give you advice on things like this, because I think that I could learn way more from you personally. That's just my personal feeling. So that hopefully that makes you feel good and confident about the things that, you're going through personally, as big or as small as they may be. I think the things that you've overcome already give you all the tools and all of the strength you need to power through anything, and that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And I hope you feel that way.
I do. And it's interesting hearing you talk about that, because I don't look at myself and the experiences that I've had like that. I know a lot of people would say it's very adventurous, and and I do agree it's like it's been really adventurous, but I don't really look at myself as someone like, because I've done all this, then I am somehow like more enlightened or knowledgeable or wise or something, but I do understand what you're saying, like I could see how people would look at that and think that, because I remember looking at like my buddy Dylan and thinking that,
I mean, you're always going to run into different challenges, but what I think you've developed throughout this whole process is the ability to take risks quickly and in a calculated fashion, to whatever degree you can calculate something. It's that 0 to 1 thing. Yeah, once you go from 0 to 1 and you get moving, you're going to encounter all sorts of bumps in the road.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who could learn from your story that if they are stagnant or uncomfortable or unhappy, the hardest part for a lot of people is making the decision to make a change. You've done that so much in your life and continue to do that. And that's the thing that I think I admire most about you, is that you're willing to make those changes and you're willing to see what happens. And that is proactive. That's what we were talking about the other night. It's like, do we wait for things to affect us and then go from there, or do we make decisions and be proactive and control the outcome of our lives and our situation? And I think, if anything, from this conversation, you absolutely have shown over and over that you're good at making decisions for yourself to get moving when you're in a place that you don't feel good about.
Yeah.
That to me is inspiring.
Cool.
And it's very, very cool.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more to talk about. I mean, one, I think it'd be really great to hear the specifics of the bike trip. You've worked on a farm, you married a girl from another country, you've toured all over the world with Periphery and done a ton of different jobs. And even now, I mean, your current position as a lighting director is more of the same for you. It's like, here's this challenge. Am I going to let the big mountain of a challenge in front of me stop me from doing this, or am I going to tackle it head on? And we can dig into this again, but it's so cool to see like you starting on like house light boards to like renting light boards to now you own your whole own light rig and you're designing your own vision of what lighting can be like in a live show setting. That's pretty cool. So if you're down, I'd love to do a part 2 where we actually dig into the specifics of like, the next chapter of this, where,
leading up to now
and some of the good stories that I know about from these trips. But yeah, I'd love to do that. So we got some more time on this tour. We got some more days off, so we'll get it in then. But cool. Yeah, man, it's really cool it's cool to hear you talk about this in this light, because only your small group of friends know this stuff. And hopefully now more people will get to hear about this. And I think it's great for those Periphery fans that know you to know more about you. But I think everybody can take away the lessons from this conversation, just based on what you've done, whether you think that the decisions you made have been impactful or big or small, I think a lot of people can listen to this and take something away. So thanks for being willing to, talk to me about it. It's very, very cool.
No, I mean, it excites me knowing that someone out there might find it inspiring enough to do something like that of their own, because it kills me when I hear or meet people that want to do something like this, but they can't. In their words, they can't for some reason, And I know there's a lot of real, situations out there, like maybe you have kids or maybe you can't quit your job or, but yeah, it's a really deep, interesting subject, and it's stuff that I really like exploring with people, like finding the difference between what we want to do and, what we're kind of stuck with, and maybe even identifying like, because I meet people like who say, oh man, I wish I could travel the world. Like I really want to do that someday. And I say like, well, why don't you? And they say, well, I really like my job and, I really don't want to leave my hometown. And I'll say, well, then you don't really want to, like I think people think they want something, but they don't, or so maybe a better thing would be to really weigh out, what do you really want to do? Do you want to stay in this hometown or do you want to travel the world? Which one do you really want to do? Because you can't have both, So yeah, it's an interesting concept and it's stuff that I'm still learning about all the time, I'm still constantly having to make all these decisions, and yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you're definitely a learner. That's one of your strengths, I think, is being able to find interest in things and then immerse yourself in learning about them and then applying them. So I'd love to talk more about that specifically too. But yeah, so we'll get this one out for people to listen to, and if there's any questions or if anybody wants to know more details of any stories, just let us know. And I think we should wrap up. But dude, I'm pretty inspired right now. So thank you for your story and for your time. So
thanks for having me. Yeah,
absolutely. We'll be back. This was the first episode of Chocolate Croissants Satellite, where I'm out on tour and I get to interview people like Jeff who are pretty fucking cool. So we'll be back and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you for listening. Take it easy.